Yes, indeed. Welcome to Marvel Movie Talk. As indeed are here, and I would say it's fortuitous timing that the first time that we're doing this show, where we're only talking about one episode, is this episode 5 of X-Men '97. If you haven't watched it, you shouldn't watch this, but that doesn't stop some people. As always, I'm Christian Bladt. We'll go clockwise. The one, the only El Sassy Pants herself, Katie Hampton. Katie, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And of course, dog like Nate Miller. Thank you, sir, for being here.
Absolutely.
And the Brooklynest Brooklyn boy I know, David Brody, and Count Eric Connor will be joining us shortly. He's busy teaching the youth of America. So actually, they're from really around the world over there. Anyway, I want to jump right into our chat because Daniel Drew is so much smarter than I am. Daniel Drew says, such an amazingly written and animated episode from 0 to 1,000 real quick. Makes me wonder what the season finale is going to feel like. Good question.
Great question.
And do you usually start late? Well, we were supposed to start at 10:15, and I think we started at 10:16. So yes, that is indeed the case. And Daniel Drew with the answer. They start when they start. So I want to kind of go round. We'll just start with the big picture, what everybody thinks about this episode. And there's a lot to think about. We're going to take our time and go through all of it. As I said, we've only got one episode to focus on this week, which works out really well. I'm going to continue with the clockwise theme and go directly to Katie Hampton. Katie, your thoughts as episode 5 unfolded?
You know, I had heard a lot of like hubbub online, and I was like, oh, I better watch this before I get something spoiled for me. And as I was watching it, the first half, I was like, this is a pretty standard episode. Like, it's a good episode, but it's pretty standard. And then it just out of nowhere goes so hard. And at the end, I was like, what? Someone compared it to the Red Wedding episode, and I have to agree.
Yeah, and we'll kind of talk about some of what this story seems to touch on and what is very likely to come. There's a few different ways to go. It's just a matter of how quickly they get there. Nate, what did you think for an episode that the listed running time was 36 minutes, and so they packed a lot into this episode, and they used their time well, I think.
I mean, it definitely felt a lot longer than that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
It was awesome. I loved it. Like again, like all of the references and just little character cameos that we've been getting each episode have like made me unexpectedly very happy just to see like some of these characters animated and on screen. And I don't know, like as soon as I saw Genosha, I knew that things were not going to go well. I did not expect it to kind of happen as quickly as it did.
Right.
But as we talked about before, like the first thing I thought about was, man, now I do kind of see the like we're speeding through some of the plot lines a little bit. I did think about that when it happened. But again, like the action sequences like are just everything that I thought I was watching as a kid, but now actually am seeing play out, like Magneto and the giant sentinel and like the explosions, and there was like blood. Like it was very intense very quickly, but I thought it was really good. All the characters got a nice character moment to shine, and again they did that thing where they have different plots that all kind of have some of the same sub themes, so they all kind of connect together. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, and I think to your point that they pushed the envelope in my notes for the episode, I definitely jotted down that Cyclops says "damn it" at one point, which he never would have done on Fox Saturday Morning, and they don't go crazy with the fact that it's for streaming. So that's why when a moment like that happens, you really take notice, Mr. Brody.
Yes.
As someone who we've established, you kind of tapped out on X-Men right before the Mutant Massacre, which is Uncanny 210, 211, and then onward. It's that kind of begins an era of really bad things happening to them on a regular basis. And by them, I mean the X-Men. And throughout different creators, bigger, more involved things, which again, we'll talk about. What did you think about the way this episode kind of takes a turn? You know, we get to Genosha and it's like, oh my God, it's like a party. Look at how much fun everybody's having. All right, apples cost a little much, but
a little.
I believe they call that Robert Kelly-flation in the X-Men universe. But what did you think about kind of the about face that the episode takes?
Well, first off, I think the X-Men need to invest in a second Blackbird because all the X-Men just sat around at the mansion with nothing to do and none of them fly. So I think that was a major problem. They need a second plane.
Great point.
I liked the episode a lot. I did not know what was coming. I didn't read anything. I didn't read these comics. I had stopped, as you said, shortly before the Mutant Massacre. I thought Magneto was going to go there and try to turn them against humans and take over and start a revolt.
Which, by the way, is
going to happen.
Something that could have happened, could still happen. And
I think it's more likely to happen.
Yeah, variations on things we've seen before. Yes.
If I remember correctly in the comics, when he allegedly dies, there's a revolt. I think this is going to show people now whether or not Magneto had a hand in this, or we can talk about who I think is responsible for having a hand in this. But I loved it. I didn't see any of this coming. I hope that death has consequences in this show. In other words, that Gambit doesn't come back, because when you we're going to talk about this later, but when you have time travel involved, you can just undo this. So I'm hoping they don't just undo it, because it needs to have ramifications.
You really haven't read X-Men in the last 5 years.
Listen, Jean Grey's died 3 times from what I understand.
Yeah, that's not even what I'm talking about.
That's not even.
That's not. No. It's like you could write on your day planner, die, and then the next day, all right, now here's all my itinerary for the day after I died. But we'll get into all of it.
Yeah.
But I think that, and it's something that we talk a lot about, that the resurrection of Jean Grey for X Factor, and how Chris Claremont really tried to fight against that, because he wanted her death to have a consequence. And it did for 5 years of our time, not continuity time. And, I think that the one character that they've stuck to is Marvel, the original Captain Marvel, because the first Marvel graphic novel, The Death of Captain Marvel, he just dies from cancer, just to kind of show there's consequences to being pelted with that much radiation. And whenever they brought him back, it's like they pick him out of a different point in time or whatever. But he's actually, as far as I know, and Daniel Drew, you would know, you tell me if he hasn't stayed dead, but Jean staying dead for 5 years is actually a pretty good accomplishment, and yes, Madeline Pryor was just supposed to be a lady who looked just like Jean Grey. And when you think about it, you're like, oh, it is a little bit more interesting that this lady who looks just like her is actually a clone.
My biggest problem with this episode is about Madeline Pryor, but we'll talk about that. I have a Madeline Pryor issue.
I want to pull on speaking of Madeline Pryor, I want to pull on a thread from last week that I didn't think we were going to get answered so quickly. Daniel Drew, what if this was all an alternate timeline that Cable was trying to save and failed? I believe that's exactly what we saw happen when we saw Cable. And Katie, when we spoke last week, and literally I had no idea that the next week it was going to be resolved. I was like, wait, nobody tell anybody, nobody say to Katie who Nathan Charles Chris. I forget what the order is. He's got his name. He's got a really
firsties.
He's got a few. But the moment when Cable says, "Mom, did you go?" Oh, okay. That's what they didn't want to tell me.
Here's the thing: is that I saw they did a previously on, and they showed the stuff with the baby, and I was like, "Oh, are they going to resolve this already?" And so I stopped, and I was like, "Mark, pause it. Do you know who their kid is?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "Of course you do." Okay, fine. And then when it happened, I was like, "Oh, it's Cable."
Yeah. It's
All
like
right.
Mark, your husband was like, yeah, it's in Rob Liefeld's Twitter bio, probably. if I had to
Probably,
guess.
honestly.
Yeah.
Good guy, Rob.
Anyway, so yeah, so what did you think when you saw that? That was that a Usual Suspects Kaiser Soze moment where you're like, oh my god, he's Cable.
I mean, for a half second, it wasn't quite as like, nefarious. You've kept this from me for so long. I honestly didn't realize that they had a baby in the comics or anything like
Yeah.
that. So to just kind of get the answer right after was like, oh, all right,
Yeah.
cool.
That,
I'll
by
accept
the way,
that.
that answer did not come right after in the comics. It was
I don't doubt it.
it was a number of years.
Yeah.
I don't think it was 10, but it was probably pretty close to it.
They also teased it too in the earlier seasons of the show.
Oh, did they?
Right, but Katie, you're on a slow rewatch of the
I am a
original
slow rewatch,
series,
yeah.
right? Yes, but that's don't rush it. Just
Consider
for
me
our
the
sake.
new fan. But yeah.
Well, and Brody never watched the old show, so
Correct.
have you picked out a few episodes since we've started this, David?
I watched the last episode. I watched the first episode, and I
Okay.
think I'm going to start the Dark Phoenix saga.
Yeah.
And I know people are probably yelling, "You got to watch." You know what? I know.
No.
I-
Yeah, it's yeah.
No, you
I once
Can
made the mistake. I once made the mistake of asking someone like, "Hey, if I wanted to catch up on Star Wars Clone Wars and just see the important ones," and my friend Ryan, he sent me an email with 100 episodes, and I'm like, "No, I can't. That's not what I was asking. I like 20 would have been okay, but I was really hoping for 10. You know, so
I think the honeymoon episode is one I need to watch because Mr. Sinister's in that, and that may be
Yes.
where he abducted Jean. That's
yeah,
Yeah.
that would probably be that. What were you going to say, Katie?
I was just saying that, like, when you have 100 episodes, you at least slow roll some of your storylines.
Yeah, right, exactly. All right, so let's kind of go through the episode in order, essentially. And my early notes had so much joy and excitement as I was just excited for the characters we saw. I play a little snippet at the top of the show of a trailer that Disney Plus had put out, and nothing I think made me more excited than to see Nightcrawler, who's always been one of my favorites.
Yeah.
My notes have all caps Kurt with like 10 exclamation points. Brody's representing. And I sort of a far more minor cameo was we see a little bit of Dazzler, not in the roller skates, but there she was. And then you're reminded like, oh, and they even animate her powers the same way as Jubilee's, but that's all right. The TV reporter, Trish Tilby, dated Hank McCoy in the comics for a long time. So I was excited to see her, less so than either of the two that I just mentioned. And at one point in the crowd in Genosha, we're seeing either Skids or Boom Boom. I couldn't tell which one it was. I think it's Skids, though. They had very similar, very late 80s, early 90s costumes. So I think it was Skids. But either way, what you were saying, Nate, just some of the crowd shots, some of the Morlocks that we got to see. I thought they do a great job with showing all of that. And let's talk about sort of the arrival in Genosha. And I'm going to start with you, David, because Genosha is more of a late 80s construct. If I remember, it's like around 250, somewhere in there in Uncanny when we first go to Genosha. I think that it's referenced before that. Had you seen anything that dealt with this? And you know what? I think they had it in one of the movies now that I think about it. One of the Fassbender as Magneto movies had a scene that took place in Genosha. But what were your thoughts about this idea of, this mutant island where they can live happily and spend a lot of money on apples?
Well, I think it was in the movie. I was familiar with the island.
Yeah.
I knew it was too good to be true because it's the X-Men. So when you see everybody's
Sure.
happy, everybody's getting along, I'm like, oh, this is going to go poorly one way or another, right? Not knowing exactly what was going to happen. Like they can't have a utopia, then there'd be no comic, right? They can't be a happy ending. And so I was like, okay, well, either they're going to go to war or something bad's going to happen. So I did anticipate that. I did like all the cameos. I liked seeing was it Maddox, right? Jamie Maddox, the
The
multiple
multiple
man.
man. Yeah, yeah,
Multiple
yeah.
Man,
It was great
yeah,
to see him. Yeah.
because he played a big role in the 120s of X-Men with Mara McTaggart from the island. So I knew who he was.
And
A lot
we
of it-
see her in this episode. We see
Yeah.
Maura McTaggart. Yeah.
And apparently now, post me reading, she's a mutant and she can be reborn with her old
well,
memories.
Yeah,
And-
it's just
yeah.
if yeah, it depends on, for some of us our continuity stops where we choose to stop it, but yes, that is something that has
Right.
been established. Yeah, yeah. But I
Yeah.
mean, there's no arguing that she's, a pivotal factor in sort of all of the all new, all different X-Men mythos. Similar question for you, Katie, about getting to spend some time on Genosha. Your thoughts, and did you have the same impending sense of doom that Brody had? That this
I-
isn't gonna last.
I did, yeah, because like Genosha is a word that, or like a place that I've been hearing about a lot.
Sure.
And I was like, yeah, it's never good when you start in a happy place with a couple of superheroes, because it's just that storytelling device alone is enough to be like, oh, all right, we're about to head into some dark territory. And I think that's why, like the stuff with Cable, I was like, oh, okay, because then it just kind of went hard from then on. And I like it, realizing that Cable is Jean and Cyclops' son. I was like, all right, fine. There's so much more that we have to like cover, because like there's so much in this.
Yeah.
Like, I think Daniel Drew mentioned it, or Craig Robinson mentioned it in the chat, but the sign like Magneto is right. I was like, ooh,
Yeah.
what world are we really in?
That's in my notes. Magneto is right.
Yeah.
I saw
Mutant
that.
Lives Matter was obviously a nod.
Yeah, and I'll also this is a great moment to bring in, of course, our friend Count Eric Connor. Thank you for joining us, sir.
Hello, one. Hello,
We
all.
appreciate hello. We appreciate having you here. We're talking Genosha for a moment, and then I'll circle back to you, Eric, and sort of a general thoughts. Nate, just sort of seeing this idea of like, oh, look how good mutants have it for about 6 minutes of screen time.
Sorry, was there a question there?
Well, just as you're watching it, your thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I also have read enough comics to know that when you see everything is nice and dandy and people are dancing and having a party, that some stuff is about to go down. The thing that really caught me was the Watcher thing.
Yes.
Did you see that? The
Dude,
Watcher in the sky?
Katie, you were the one who sent that to me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I legitimately didn't see it, but I'm not smart enough to have downloaded that screenshot that Katie sent to me. But
I
I'll
literally
bring
just
it.
did it with my phone.
I'll bring it up later in the episode as we go along.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
not one
that-
you
that
sent
freaked
me,
me
is it,
out.
Eric? The Watcher in the sky.
No,
Okay,
it's not.
but anyway,
I didn't catch it either.
yeah. But
older-
yes,
older
that's
eyes,
but
I guess.
it's a great point, Nate. Yeah, because and it was the same thing in comics. When you saw the Watcher, you're like,
Oh shit.
because he shows up for the first time Galactus comes to Earth, and then the death of Dark Phoenix, he's like on the first page, and you're like, oh, okay, something's happening here. So yeah, I thought that was a really nice touch. I agree with you, Nate.
But so the thing that I really kind of walked away with at the end was, like, we had talked about the time travel thing, and with Cable already introduced, like, it's like, well, how much of this is going to stick?
Yeah.
But with the tone that the show kind of approached it, and especially this being like a midway point of the season, I kind of think a lot of this is going to stick. I think at the very least, it's going to take us the majority of the season to return to like the past and change some of that stuff that happened. But oh man, the Gambit's arc was just so good, and like he already, like, especially now, all the through lines through the other, like the last episode when we had the Jubilee stuff, and there's that little bit in the beginning with the stuff between Magneto and Rogue and Gambit, and like all the stuff that they've been dropping throughout the other episodes, like culminating into this, was like really satisfying. And Gambit's characterization was excellent. Because you could like he didn't throw a tantrum, like he was upset, but he was like, whatever you want to do, I love you enough to like not
Figure it out.
be an ass. And
Heartbreaking.
and then to end with that line was just like holy, and what a way to go out. Oh my
Yeah.
god, that was so cool.
Well, and yeah, it's something that I think you don't realize is part of his power set until he's in that ultimate situation where he's going to use it, where he can supercharge his entire body. But
That
with
was amazing. Yeah.
with the expected result. In a moment, I want to go through some comments from showrunner, sort of creator of this, writer Bo DeMeo, that he spoke about this episode in particular. He addresses the fact that he's sort of breaking his silence because this was an important episode for him. But Eric, I want to get your thoughts. But I want to get your thoughts, Eric, as we talk about there's the Genosha aspect. Sort of, we're really focused on kind of the second half of the episode. Not that there aren't things that we have to talk about from the beginning, but just take a moment and share your thoughts with us, Eric.
Wait, I turned it off a few minutes early. Something happened at the end of the episode?
Not really. Yeah, I mean, there was
You're like, I'm bored, I'm just gonna pause.
Yeah, it was like the farewell from Sound of Music. It was actually
okay.
Yeah.
It worked out great, and it worked out great for all of them in Europe.
Nightcrawler did the Avita Zane part. It was great.
Yep.
This one, I it's funny because I watched it late. I watched it like, it's funny. I have to ask, but what day do these actually air? Is it Tuesday or Wednesday?
So it's Wednesday. But it depends, because some of these shows, like on the West Coast, you could get them Tuesday at 9 p.m. I don't know if it's Tuesday at midnight, or 12:01 Wednesday morning. Nate, you usually watch it late, like Wednesday.
It's midnight.
Yeah, so it's midnight. Okay.
On the West Coast, at least.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so I didn't watch it until late last night. And so I saw, Katie, you had posted something. I think you compared it to the Red Wedding. Was that you?
Someone else did initially, and then I was like, I get why they said that.
Yeah. So I was like, it was kind of interesting for me because I was like, all right, something's going on. And I'm watching it, and it actually, more times than not, you don't want to read that, but it actually helped because as I'm watching it, I thought the first half was perfectly good, but there was so much tension for me watching it. Because I'm like, all right, things are about to take a real turn here. But even with that knowledge, the depth they went with it was wonderfully shocking. It's like, oh, we're going to get rid of Meg. Oh, wait, are we spoiling things? Even though I just said, and there's not many.
No, it's fine. Yeah, we said at the top of the show that.
So like,
if you're watching this having not seen the episode, this is one of those ones where that's definitely on you. But go ahead.
Yeah. No, so like we're gonna get rid of Magneto, and then David, I was thinking Dayenu, which in Hebrew means that'll do. That's enough.
That would be sufficient.
That will be sufficient. And then hold my drink, hold my fourth cup of wine, because we're gonna go get Gambit too. And that Gambit death, there was one of you guys might remember this. There was, I want to say maybe around Civil War time, Hawkeye died in the comic.
Yes.
And he did it in a way where he was dying, and then he was like, nah, this isn't how I go. And then he grabbed like some, I don't know, cyborg kind of thing and flew it right into the heart of something to bring down a bunch of the bad guys. And he basically, as he's about to die, is like, this is how I go. That kind of, for me, watching Gambit in that scene, it's like he in essence knows how this is going to play out on his way there. And so it was so very on brand for him as a character. But yeah, Gambit in this episode, my God, they gave him a hell of one. But I don't want to forget about Cyclops's journey either, where all of a sudden Cyclops with the heel turn. Cyclops,
which is really like a separate sort of a separate part of the conversation. Our friend Jordan Bloom, who's been on the show a number of times, he covered episodes 1 and 2 with us. He said that he was excited that he's about to get his favorite Cyclops, because which is what this set up. So as we go through this episode, we're going to talk about some of the things that this sets up for probably the very near future in the course of this season. And our visual audience does now see what Katie had sent me. You do see the Watcher there in the
The
skies
stars is in
over
his eyes. I
Genosha.
love
Yeah,
that.
it's a very nice touch, and I was glad to have Katie bring it to my attention because, as Eric said, old eyes might not have seen that, and
Well, it's funny because
my old eyes did not. Sorry, what were you going to say, Katie?
I made Mark rewind it like 7 times. I was like, he's in there. It's the Watcher. And he's like, I don't know. I don't see it. I was like, he's right there. And that's why I took the photo. So I could be like, look.
Yeah.
You don't see it, you old bastard.
Yeah, I definitely thought I saw a face, but I was like, oh.
Yeah, but like who else was that possibly going to be? So it's a long statement from Bo DeMeo on his social media, and he is someone we haven't heard from in a while. He has exited the show. I believe he wrote scripts for season 2, but he won't be involved in the actual production. This isn't so much about that. I can understand he wanted to take the time to talk about this episode in particular. I'm not going to read everything, but it's a couple of screens. But the point that he makes, I think, is fascinating. And I'm glad Nate reminded me that I wanted to talk about this. A professional host would have notes that included this. But that's why I have the rest of you and Daniel Drew to remind me sometimes what I want to talk about. So Bo says, episode 5 was the centerpiece of my pitch to Marvel in November of 2020. The idea being to have the X-Men mirror the journey that any of us who grew up on the original show have experienced since being kids in the 90s. The world was a seemingly safer place for us, where a character like Storm would comment on how skin-based racism was, quote, quaint in the episode One Man's Worth. For the most part, to our young minds, the world was a simple place of right and wrong, where questions about identity and social justice had relatively clear-cut answers. So the next point that he makes was one of those ones that when I read it, I'm like, oh my God, I see exactly what he's doing. And it really is kind of the break with 1997 versus 2024. So Bo goes on to say, then 9/11 happened and the world turned against itself. Things weren't so safe anymore. Grassroots populist movements began to rise around the world as a whole nation struggled to deal with collective trauma and fracture at the seams of every diverse demographic. The effects we still feel today and have only been exacerbated by more collective traumas like COVID or several recessions. So he also talks about personally, 9/11 was also when he came out of the closet to his family and realized not everyone would accept him. And he goes on to talk about some of those personal things, but there's a point that he makes that I want to touch on towards the end of this part of the post. He says it looked like Gambit's story was going a specific direction. The crop top was chosen to make you love him. Pulling off his shirt was intentional. There's a reason he told Rogue any fool would suffer her hand in a dance, even if it ended up not being him suffering. So he references if events like 9/11, Tulsa, Charlottesville, or Pulse nightclub teach us anything, it's that too many stories are often cut far too short. And if I think a lot of us remember the terrible story of the Pulse nightclub in Orlando where there was the mass shooting, he references personally that he partied at Pulse. It was my club. He has great memories of its awesome white lounge. It was like Genosha, a safe space for me and everyone like me to dance and laugh and be free. I thought about this a lot when crafting this season and this episode and how the gay community in Orlando rose to heal from that event. There's some other stuff he talks about that we'll get to sort of about what's coming next, but just sort of reading that in the creator's own words, you're like, oh my God, it's like every bit as tragic as it seems to us. Like, look how happy everyone is. We know something bad's going to come. And he's like, yeah, I'm trying to capture a very specific moment. And Nate, I want to go to you first because one, you're the one who reminded me I wanted to share that, but I know you had seen that earlier. What are your thoughts sort of seeing about, yes, this is an animated show that is geared towards people who have nostalgia for the original. It is definitely for, it's not solely like, oh, this is for kids. Ultimately, kids are going to watch it, but talk about sort of taking this very real world tragedy and trauma aren't even strong enough words, and sort of, bringing it into the world of the X-Men.
Sure. So for me, it's sometimes it's hard to quantify what makes things good or like what makes things touching and stuff, right? And especially with adaptations, I feel like a lot of time the disappointment from people comes from the mark being set somewhere and then the subsequent adaptation failing to meet that mark. I think part of the reason why this is so good, not just because the animation is great, the character designs are awesome, the voicing is great, but not just the stories that they're choosing, but the way that they are presenting them is very true to, at least to me, to what X-Men is. When you boil
Yeah.
it down, X-Men is a story about civil rights. It's about the otherizing of people that just want to survive and the struggles that they live with in a world that doesn't want to accept them, that sees them as different than others, right? And so for them to be able to bring something from the 90s which still kind of had that, and like what he was talking about in the 90s, this sentiment of like, oh, everything's fine, everything's looking better, all that old stuff is in the past, we've figured everything out, and then to give us this kind of like breaking point 9/11 moment of their safe space, I think really says to me that the writers of this show understand what X-Men are supposed to be about, the story it's supposed to be telling to kids, to adults, to everyone, of having you empathize with these people that are otherized and are constantly hunted and don't have full rights, and like Scott talking about the dude being like, he didn't want to deliver my baby, like that's
Yeah.
crazy, like
Right.
that's crazy. It's not even like it was Beast and Glob or like some really all right, you look kind of scary. They totally look like normal people with a visor on. So I think they really nailed that tone. And again, this is the stuff that makes me more excited to see where they're going to go with this, because it's not just cool guys with powers fighting other cool guys with powers and explosions and stuff. Like there is a real focus on humanity and heart that is like the core of all of the storytelling, and yeah, there's no faking that. I love it.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Katie, I heard some reactions from you as I was reading Bo DeMayo's comments. So, sort of your thoughts on kind of taking this pivotal moment. It's literally in the middle of this 10-episode season, in the middle of the 5th episode. So, in the middle of the 5th episode, there, as I said earlier, it's kind of it's a very abrupt about face, the sort of the whiplash that some of us might experience. What do you think, Katie?
And I feel like we've been getting a little bit of this, or a little too much of this, through Marvel, just in general, just with the movies and whatnot. I appreciated that we had some, I guess, normalcy with the X-Men before we got into this, because
Yeah.
there's been a lot of dark material, and this felt like it was earned. It was definitely devastating, but it also keeps me even more intrigued in the series of where they're going to go from this, how they're going to recover, like what's going to happen to everybody. It was definitely a shock, but it didn't feel quite as depressing as some of the movies have been as of late, which is nice.
Right. Well, and then also, I mean, I think we need to touch on the fact that, as Magneto is digging in for his last stand, we, no reference to X-Men 3. I don't mean that last stand. He is actually taking a stand, and we
Yeah.
see his flashbacks to the concentration camps. And
Oh yeah, that was
the obviously the phrase never again it immediately comes to mind, sort of the stance that he takes. And I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on sort of that moment of Magneto, and then also sort of what Bo DeMayo had to say. I'll go to you first, Mr. Brody.
Well, in regards to the Holocaust flashback, I don't know if you saw the symbolism when he said "never again."
Yeah.
He attacked the Sentinel with a train.
Oh wow.
I didn't get. Wow. Yeah. That's
But also,
And-
it gets
yep.
even better. He attacked him with a train, but he whipped him
Yeah, he
with the
did.
train.
Yes.
And you
Yeah.
remember
Yeah,
the
listen.
first time we saw Genosha in this show was when the Sentinels had the mutants as slaves on the island. I was
Mhm.
like,
It's a
somebody
great
pointed that out
point.
to me, and I lost my
Yeah.
mind.
Boom. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
So that hit me. The 9/11 reference to me always reminded me of the movie Untouchables. Their very name was the Untouchables, but then one of them gets killed in an elevator, and with his blood they write touchable.
right.
And as an American, we're surrounded on two sides by oceans. No one's ever, except for the Civil War, no foreign entity had ever come here and attacked us. We had preventative oceans. And then when 9/11 happened, I felt like, okay, we're touchable.
Yeah.
And that's how Genosha felt. It's the island off the coast of, wherever it's off the coast of, right? And there's nobody there. It's nothing around them, and everybody there is super powered. So it was like when Wakanda got attacked. You're like, wait a minute, right?
Why would you do that? Yeah.
Right? Like Wakanda couldn't be attacked, but then it was. And I think this was similar. And to Nate's point about not delivering the baby, right? Talking about symbolism. To me, that's not baking a cake for gay couples.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's picking and choosing who to provide service for. And I read a comment on some Instagram page where people were upset about morph being non-binary, and somebody said, oh, it's typical woke bullshit. And somebody said, if you think the X-Men just got woke,
you haven't watched the X-Men.
Oh yeah, it's the same point. It's the same point I always make about Star Trek. The idea that Star Trek went woke. I'm like, yeah, in 1966.
Yeah, the Frank Gorshin episode is a brilliant example.
Yeah,
black
right,
and white.
exactly.
He's black on this side. I'm black on this side. Right.
I mean, the new X-Men, the fact that there was a Russian guy on the team in 1975, that was enough, but there was so much more to it beyond
and a German and a black.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
There was a Benetton ad that if you made a movie now, you'd be like, oh, look, they had to put a black guy and a blue guy and a Russian. And,
yeah. I want to get your thoughts kind of on the same thing, Eric. Sort of Magneto, what Bodemeo had to say about sort of, what this represents for mutants.
Right. Well, one thing too that happened was the early 2000s is, and this is not a time I was reading comic books very much, but I believe X-Men went through like kind of a darker phase. I don't recall what the name of that storyline was specifically.
Well, yeah, I do want to talk about that in a moment. It's E is for Extinction.
Yeah,
and,
that's it. Thank you.
Yes, and it's something that it's when Grant Morrison took over, sort of after a real low point in the X-Men in the late 90s. And Grant Morrison takes over. He does this story called E is for Extinction. And I messaged you last night, Eric, that not this month, but in May, that'll be our entry for Geekscape Book Club, because I'm aware of that story, but I have never read it. So it's sort of there's a lot of imagery from that story. It's only 3 parts that are featured in this, but I wanted to kind of let you finish your thoughts before I shared some of that.
Right. Well, and I think X-Men was always this. X-Men was always the one that spoke to so many different people, that was about being different, marginalized, persecuted. And it's one that probably a lot of us could relate to at different points in our lives, in ways that maybe you can relate to Batman or Superman the same way.
Sure.
And so I think like X-Men doing this is X-Men doing its X-Men thing in a way that the movies hasn't really gotten to. They've had moments. Have you tried not to be a mutant? Like that great scene in X-Men 2. But really actually having the courage to sort of go into those waters. That's something we've, previously we talked about. Will Marvel go there? How far would they be willing to go with some of these themes? Or more specifically, how far will Disney be willing to go with some of these themes? But I think this cartoon, and again, it's funny even using that word, because cartoon sounds young. And yet the storytelling here is anything but.
Oh yeah.
Thundercats was a cartoon.
Right.
This is animation.
Animation. Sorry. And by the way, so as I was spending this morning, of course, 2 fabulous X-Men characters, I then discovered I had to mourn another Marvel character, because Fezzik got to a vintage black and white Captain America, who is now headless, footless.
Oh no.
And so
Wow.
I felt like this was the right day for this to happen.
Oh.
I'm
Maybe
sorry
Cable
that
Free
Cable
is
will
not
time
too-
travel and
Yeah, you
we'll-
go.
we'll-
Cable
we'll
will be able to
save
save that.
save Cap.
Exactly.
Yeah, although Cable might take out the dog entirely, and I still do love him. So I hope he doesn't go
Just
too
tend to solve
ballistic.
things with big guns.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was reading online that some of the imagery in this episode is very much
300
representative
sensible.
of E for Extinction, and just sort of a lot of what we see in it. And we'll talk about that specifically in the Geekscape Book Club next month. But yeah, it's sort of a very, it was a pivotal moment. I believe that story is also in 2001. It's this moment of like, oh yeah, we're kind of done messing around. And it was this idea that the Sentinels always seemed kind of goofy and very easy to beat, and then you sort of get this new generation. And I don't want to go into the very specifics of that story as I was reading about it, because I feel like we're going to get we've already had a lot of representation of that. One of the things that I think is important, and I think it was before you were here, Eric, Brody was hoping that the deaths that we saw in this episode are going to have consequences. And Nate and I mentioned in passing that that's not really the way that the X-Men work in 2024. Death has the opposite of consequences. It's almost like Groundhog Day at this point. The montage where he keeps trying to kill himself, and he wakes up again after he electrocuted himself with a toaster. That's basically the X-Men now. So there's the idea that we'll get what is referred to as the Krakoa era, which is just ending right now, but there was a lot of buzz for those 5 or so years, and really dealing with more modern stories. When the original series was really rooted in, obviously, it ended in 1997. So the stories that it was pulling from were still mostly stories I was familiar with. These are more things that I know by reputation. And that's kind of the whole point of the Geekscape Book Club, is to read these things that I haven't had a chance to read before. And, I kind of look forward to being able to do that. But I do want to sort of go back in a moment and talk about the beginning part of the episode. But what Bodemeo went on to say is that this is sort of nothing compared to episodes 8, 9, and 10 of this season. It's sort of, it was a pivotal moment, of course. And I mean, this is one of those, even those of you like, I didn't watch it on Wednesday, but I finally had to watch it because I'm like, too many people are talking about it. And that was kind of what you were saying, Eric, was like, something's going to get spoiled, and it's very easy for that to happen in this day and age. So I was just like, all right, I feel like I better, see where we're going. But the last 3 episodes of the season are going to be a 3-parter. And, I think that next week we are going to pull on the threads and continue with Life Death. So we've got Life Death 2. But what we get at the end of the season, and sort of why I took the time to talk about E for Extinction, is that the title for the final 3 episodes is Tolerance is Extinction, parts 1, 2, and 3. So I feel like we're going to sort of get those machinations of the that's not who I wanted. I didn't want the X Babies, but I love the X Babies. In any case, this idea that that's what we're going to get, sort of really kind of turning into this storyline. And it seems like sort of the way that they're handling this is in the way that comics happen a lot of times, which is, no, you don't get your answers next issue. We're going to give you other answers to other stuff you cared about, and then we're going to make you wait. At least here, it's only a week. And our friend Coy Jandro, who did a version of this show when it was on Popcorn Talk, he posted something that I think is very true. This is why you release shows weekly. and you don't put it all there for everybody to binge, because how much are people talking about this, and how much did those of us who didn't watch it at midnight on Wednesday have a day to realize, like, oh shit, I gotta watch this. I cannot wait, and Nate, I know that we've got a little bit more time with you, but I know you have to duck out before too long. So I wanted to kind of tee it up for you. Anything specifically you wanted to touch on that we haven't talked about yet? We really had to talk about the second half of the episode. I do want to talk about stuff in the first half, but I wanted to kind of give you a chance to touch on anything that stood out from sort of the second half of it.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't really talked about Jean and her kissing Logan.
Which I was like, oh, is that the big reveal?
I thought it might have been.
I was like, wow, Katie, man, that was a surprisingly Puritan reaction to that kiss.
Right. Well, and that's what I was thinking, because someone had called it the Red Wedding before, and I was like,
well, she does have red hair.
I was like, it's a little bit of a betrayal, but we've had that trio for so long. Like, we already know that's like that love.
The term is thruple.
So sorry.
So I'm watching the show with my partner, who does not. She hasn't watched the original show. She hasn't even really watched the movies. We watched a couple of them, the bad ones. So there's lots of questions, and so we're watching the show. And
a good cook, at least.
Jean, what?
At least a good cook.
Excellent.
Brody.
Excellent.
Okay.
Right.
No.
Look, if she was also an X-Men nerd like me, then we'd have a huge vacuum in our life of skills and talents and stuff. So we're talking about, the Jean scene comes up, and she's like looking at the thing, and Logan's there, and she's like, are they like a thing? Like, what's, and I'm like trying to, like, how do I explain 40 years of will they, won't they, thruple, not thruple, clones die, alternate timelines. And I'm like, no, it's not that serious. Like, he's in love with her, but she, like, loves Scott. And then she turns and kisses him, and she's like, oh, that's not serious. And I'm like, I don't know what's happening. That was crazy. I was not expecting that. I have always been a big Wolverine fan, and I've always found the thing with Jean to be kind of weird, to be honest. Like, I know that in some ways she also loves him too, but I found it more to be more one-sided, like a almost unrequited love thing. But the weird thing for me was once the Origins book came out and I learned more about him and the James Howlett stuff, and it's like, dude, you're like at least 100, if not like 200 years old, and she's just barely becoming an adult. All that stuff is really weird. Anyways, all that stuff is
Logan,
fine.
you're literally 100 years older than her.
Yeah.
I do think
so. No one of his age.
Let's say January 1940 December romance. Thank you, Katie.
Ding, ding, ding.
Ring the bell. Ring the bell.
Wait,
no, I'm in
my
Seattle.
bell.
I don't have.
Oh,
anyway. Go ahead.
Makeshift bell.
What is that?
I don't even know what that was. Let's
compressed air. Sorry, Nick. There we go.
Who are we?
Morning Zoo.
Hey, that was my job for many years. Be nice.
The Jean. It was surprising, but given the context of like her not knowing who she is and trying to sort through this parse of like what are my memories, what are not my memories. I don't know. I find it all very interesting. It kind of made sense to me. It was kind of surprising. Really, the thing with Jean, though, I'm trying to figure out is what is this like vision thing that we are seeing that's like a callback to the vision she had before in the other episode, right? Yeah. And then there's the whole thing with Scott in the Mind Palace. I didn't understand that. So he was talking to Madeline in his mind. Is that what that was?
He's been keeping tabs on Madeline, who I think he gives a very honest answer. He's like, well, obviously I love both of you because you're kind of the same person. You're not identical.
As far as what he knew,
you're identical people.
He spent time with her. Has a baby with her.
He had a baby with her, and it's very complicated. And I think as we start to kind of follow the breadcrumbs for Jean gets a bloody nose, Madeline gets a bloody nose. And the Jean and Logan thing is very interesting because it was always kind of, touched on. It was there, and the reason why in Uncanny X-Men 137 he's able to kill her and actually end the Phoenix Force is because she knows that he's the only one who could do it. Cyclops would never kill her, and Logan understood that he needed to. But the image I'm sharing for our visual audience is the back cover of Classic X-Men #1, which it basically took Giant Size X-Men #1 and consolidated like 40 pages of it into a single page so it could tell this story back at the mansion after the fact. And they barely know each other at this point. They've literally just met. The new X-Men rescued the original X-Men. And it sort of, in a way, it kind of retcons something that I think a lot of people feel like was there. There's this interaction that you see, he just starts talking to her outside and she's clearly drawn to him, but she of course loves Scott. But it's, so it's a fascinating part of their backstory that, has been there as long as there've been new X-Men, but they really, I think, turned into it in the 80s, when she came back and started.
Well, there's also too, there's always been that like Scott is the Boy Scout, perfect guy, plays by the rules, right? Like, which is attractive in one light, and then the opposite is Logan, who's the like tough, gritty, I do what I want, I'm kind of dirty, right? So getting that kind of dichotomy between the two of them, as I think is kind of what has kept it going. So what I think is really going to be interesting now is, given the kind of hint of a change that we're seeing in Cyclops, like now it really makes sense of why he came across as such a badass in those that first episode, in the first action sequence, because I think we're going to start to see a little bit of like the tables turn of Logan's going to go into a little bit of his like, actually I'm an emotional little furball. And Scott is going to go into his full-on radical, like, you know what? I've had enough of this. Charles was wrong. Magneto was right. I'm going to start blasting.
Yeah, no, exactly. And, I've seen a few people comment on how impressive it is that the stories that have been told through these first 5 episodes have been as strong and as compelling as they have been. And Wolverine's really been in the back seat because if you just look at sales and merchandising and all of those things and the legacy of the character, he is the most popular X-Men character, just in terms of how many pages have been devoted to him and everything. And Brody thinks it's appropriate for me to share from Uncanny 394. This is when Logan was not just enjoying some time with Jean, but it was also I believe he was applying the cream and the clear as Barry Bonds did, because he's
and that's the cover of my wedding photo album.
Dude,
man,
what
those are
were
muscles
we?
on muscles. My
What?
God, man.
Man, I don't even know what's worse. Is the late 90s like
Macho Man stuff?
Lanefield, like muscles on muscles, patches everywhere, or like this
It's like a-
hypersexualized abs on abs, like
it's the old bit of column A, bit of column B, and I'm sorry, Daniel Drew made a joke here. Claws were popped.
Yep.
Oh, Daniel, I'm so glad when you're able to be with us. But it's dealing with that, dealing with sort of this radicalized Cyclops, is it's the Cyclops where I know Brody, you balked at the idea that Scott and Emma Frost ended up together for quite some time, actually, in the comic books. That Cyclops, it actually sort of fits as a part of it. And I don't know if we're getting there, but I was
Sebastian's
glad to see.
dead now.
Yeah.
Spoiler. So she's available.
Well, we don't know who's dead to stay dead is really
it's the end of. We remember back in the day, like the end of like a season of Dynasty would be like someone would come in with a machine gun and shoot everyone,
right?
And then you had to come back to see which 2 minor
supporting
characters
died. Are
died.
you saying, Eric, that
Yes,
next week Patrick Duffy's going to step out of the shower and we're going to realize it was all a dream?
If they would have saved the show, yes.
Now wait a minute. That was Dallas. On Dynasty, they killed Steven and he came back as a different actor who was taller. They said he had plastic surgery
Yeah,
on the
kinda like
explosion
that.
on the oil rig. So
I
maybe
was gonna be
another-
upset at Eric for bringing this up, but then I kind of like
No,
where we
Brody's
went.
got my back. Thank you.
So it's possible another next episode, another actor comes back as Gambit. Don't laugh; it could happen.
Oh, and he's not
He's
gonna
not
be
Cajun anymore.
I was gonna say he's not Cajun.
Right?
Yeah,
He could be
yeah.
black, and he's like 5
All
foot
right.
6, but it could happen. Oh,
Yeah,
you're
but
Could be
Gambit. Yeah,
Channing Tatum.
play along.
Look,
It's Gambit.
There
Yeah.
you go.
It's Channing Tatum. Yeah,
It's
Yeah.
literally live action Channing Tatum.
It's not.
in the animation.
It's
Green
not
screen him
Taylor.
in.
It's not Taylor Kitsch, who, as of now, is still the only live action Gambit we've gotten from X-Men Origins Wolverine. So, Nate, I think you bring up a great point about Logan and Jean, and I do want to talk about it with sort of everyone. But and then this is the moment from the actual show, not just the cover from the back cover from Classic X-Men #1. And I there were a lot of moments in this episode. I'm like, oh wow, they did that, and there's a lot of things that I'm familiar with and I know exist in the X-Men canon. So we'll spend a few more minutes on that. But Nate, before I let you go, where do you think we're going between now and the end of the season? We've touched on Krakoa, we've touched on Eons for Extinction, and the Cyclops that we're talking about is kind of relative to a number of different pivotal stories. What do you feel like is most likely to be happening, and possibly the toughest part to explain to your partner? Like, oh yeah, no, they're not just the thing that's like, oh wait, if this happens, it's really going to throw out everything out the window that I said.
I don't know. On one side, I can see them moving. This is to kind of like mirroring the comics of that age, of a transitional into like the new X-Men space, and like maybe there's an alternate team, or they do a costume change, or they do a spin-off for Young Mutants or something, and like we're setting up towards that. But the other part of me really thinks that, like, especially with the way that, like, we had talked about the Madeline Pryor and the Inferno stuff and how they kind of like sped through it.
Yeah.
But I'm thinking now that they didn't speed through it. They're just adapting it in a different way. They've like set up the characters in different places, and now they're going to react differently. And it's kind of got a lot of the same themes, but it's just not. It's playing out a little bit differently. So I think it might go that route of where, yes, we're getting E's for Extinction, but I don't think it's going to be quite literally E's for Extinction with Sublime and the U-Men and Cassandra Nova and all that stuff. I don't know if we'll quite get all that. It would be cool to see Cassandra Nova, but
yeah, which, by the way, I just to interject, that's specifically who I think Cable's talking about, because Cable says she's coming, and then somebody else says
he said
coming.
he's coming.
He says he's coming. Okay,
Yeah.
somebody else
Yeah.
says she's coming. So I think that is one half of what we're about to get. And if we do get Cassandra Nova, we'll spend a lot of time sort of talking about the backstory and how that character fits into sort of what we're talking about in terms of extinction and marginalized people. But I wanted to let you finish your thought.
My biggest thing is, where is Xavier? Because I know he's not dead.
Yeah, we all know,
he's
not
in
dead.
space. He's in space.
Yeah.
Please come home, Dad. We need you right now. So I'm just waiting for that to happen and see how that's going to play out. I'm so excited. And I love that. I know that they're adapting comics, so I know it's going to be like really rich storytelling, but I don't know exactly what's going to happen. Like, they're not copying beat for beat.
They're not doing
Like,
it one for
even
one,
the
yeah.
life death thing is like very similar, but not exactly the same. And I have total trust in the showrunners and the direction that the show is going.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, Nate, thank you as always for being with us, and we'll see you again next week. Let everybody know where they can stay in touch with you and continue the conversation, as we say. Nate.
You can find me everywhere at Dog Like Nate, 2 G's.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Nate, and we'll kind of circle back on talking about Jean now as Nate heads off to Genosha and parts unknown. But he's got more than one Blackbird, so he has to. So let's talk a little bit about that. And I want to start with you, Brody, because Wolverine and Jean is kind of a thing from the era that you read, but they really don't turn into it until they start kind of retconning the backstory of the classic X-Men, the
Yeah.
all new X-Men. So what did you think when we have that moment between the two of them outside? It's very reminiscent of what I showed.
He and Scott both loved Jean.
Yes.
Then he and Scott both loved Madeline Pryor as Jean.
Yeah.
Now they're both there. Pick one.
I mean, I think that's really the thing. Logan's like, oh, come on. There's another one. Can I have this one now?
Right. Like if he wants Madeline, then give Jean to Logan. And now if he ends up with the White Queen when he's got two Jeans to choose from, that's a double slap in the face.
No. Timeshare. This is the key.
Timeshare.
Sure.
Oh God.
Sister Wives.
I mean, look, there's literally nothing's off the table.
Poly seems to be a thing right now, so you know.
Absolutely. So what do you think about all this, Katie? All the complicated love triangle of the Uncanny X-Men.
I mean, it was another one of those things similar to like revealing that Cable was the son of Jean and Scott. I was like, oh, like it shocked me at first. I was like, what? And Mark was like, well, they've always been like, oh, will they, won't they type. I was like, yeah, no, I know that, but like it's still a big moment that she kissed him. Like that was the thing that really threw me off, is that she made the first move. And I was like, I get it, like she's really confused right now. He's in love with another woman that looks exactly like her. She's been off doing God knows what. And I like there's a lot of stuff that like felt very like dramatic, but like understandable. And it felt a little bit like she was like, well, if Scott's in love with another woman, I might as well,
Yeah, but
which doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel right.
Scott doesn't only want to have his cake and eat it too. He wants to have all of the cake locked up somewhere.
And cake number two.
Yeah.
Right.
He wants all the cake. Yeah.
And I agree with you, Brody. Like, just pick one. And
but here's the thing: she's like, oh well, he loves another woman, so I'm gonna kiss Logan. He loves the exact like. If you're gonna cheat, there's no better excuse than she's a clone of you. Like she's as close as possible to you. That's why I love her. It's not her twin sister. It's her clone. Yeah. That doesn't happen in real life.
That we haven't had the beat of you should have known the difference. Well, like how?
I'm really glad that they haven't, because I find that so annoying. I honestly thought Scott storming out of the interview was like really earned. Like I thought all of his reactions, I kind of wanted to cut away to Falcon where he's like, he's out of line, but he's right. Something like that. But it like everything kind of was motivated and made sense. Even Jean like turning to Logan, it feels like she's in on a lot of like tumultuous personal stuff right now, and turning to Logan, I think, was a very weird and surprising thing, but also a very human thing to show.
It's interesting because for all intents and purposes, Nathan isn't really her son. It's Madeline's son. But at the same time, he is her son. So I think that
surrogate. It's perfect surrogate.
The choice that they've made for how to tell this story and how to weave it into other things has been fascinating. Eric, I want to talk to you all about this, and we'll go through some of the images that you set, including for a visual audience, the one that we have right now. Talk about what stood out for you with these memories that Jean's having.
Well, and please help me with this, because I remember in X-Men 2, the movie, Jean got killed, quote unquote, by like basically she held off all the water from a broken dam, and then it swallowed her. And so I wasn't sure if that was also a moment in the comic book as well. I don't recall.
No, not specifically that I remember. Hers is more she basically pilots a space shuttle on re-entry when it doesn't have the shields, and that's kind of how she becomes Phoenix, because she dies in that moment, but then she's replaced by Phoenix. And
when they killed her, it was like with some kind of gun or something, right? It wasn't like a
kill the Phoenix.
No,
Logan stabs her in the heart.
Stabbed her. Right.
What?
Isn't that 137?
No, Logan goes to kill her in 135. And he can't do it, but she realizes he was going to. And then she kills herself in 137, where she has the old Shi'ar weapon from the moon, and she shoots herself with it.
That's it. Okay, thank you.
All right.
So
Thank you, bro.
this moment here actually felt like maybe a little bit of an Easter egg to X-Men 2 and 3. With the water. But I also think even if you don't make that connection, I love the visual of memories in these like big drops of water. I think was kind of a cool setting. One thing you guys in talking about the relationship with Scott, I think was interesting is how he was cheating on her by having that sort of telekinetic bond with other Jean. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. I mean, that's like so.
That was their thing, yeah.
Right, right. That was our thing, and then it brings to mind. I don't know, people having questionable relationships over texting. It's like the idea of what point is it cheating?
Yeah,
and I think what's for me, I don't know which one's cheating. They don't know which one's cheating.
There's emotional affairs with that, I would say.
Yeah. Right.
Well, let me bring in this comment from Daniel Drew. Do you think we'll ever be shown when Jean was taken? Yes, I absolutely think they'll show that. Like when we get to Sinister and Flight, we'll know what the moment is, and I think that moment is going to make it even harder for Cyclops to deal with his two wives.
Wait, who's the mom? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
It's wonderfully sticky stuff that and to their credit, we were worried about them burning through story too fast previously. I think here is showing that they're in some ways, though, with that relationship, they're not.
Yeah,
I wanted to
similar to what Nate was saying. Like, I think you guys are totally right. Like, I think they're burning off the stuff that like maybe from the comics or just from like being in love with these stories. But then going in different directions and having themes from other stuff that kind of fits a little bit better for this story in particular.
Yeah, I wanted to circle back to what Nate said actually, and that like Inferno is clearly not over because Madeline is not the Goblin Queen, but there's she's experiencing sort of the nosebleeds like Jean is, and we know Sinister is still out there. So yeah, I think that some of these stories that maybe felt like they rushed through just aren't done, and I have to take into consideration that within the last like 2 years they did Inferno again, so I don't actually know what made up that Inferno. So I think there's a lot of ways to go, and I know Eric, you always do such a good job sending me so many images. We've shared the one of them, and I know why you sent this one because of the picture that follows it. And I felt like this crowd would really appreciate the fact that we have Eric Lensher, we have Magneto with the open shirt there, and then I clicked out of the image before I went to the one I wanted. So I'll get to it. Don't you?
You had your chance
pay me?
And you blew it.
Don't you pay me? No, never mind. So we have sort of this image, and it of course evokes one of the greatest villains in cinematic history. Khan Noonien Singh, of course,
top to bottom.
Magneto
buried alive. This is SETI Alpha 5, but anyway, neither here.
You killed my son.
I thought that was great.
Missing the target,
Magneto.
And you felt like the sort of the elaborate dance sequence with Rogue. I don't even know what this is a still from, so I'm going to let you explain what this is.
Oh, that's Ready Player One.
No, that's exactly what I was getting that vibe of. It was a beautiful dance. I thought that sequence was really great.
Yeah, I thought it was really well done.
Yeah.
And then this is Katie's moment of there's Cable, and I love that. Yeah. And
it's honestly it's how I feel looking at my son now that he's a little taller than me.
You like your Cable?
He's my Cable, and he's got the eyes, but he's all big.
I love this interaction with Kurt where he's saying to Remy, for a man named Gambit, your poker face is very poor. I was glad you chose that
how
one.
great was Nightcrawler?
I mean,
So
he
good.
always is. He never disappoints as far as I'm concerned.
That was the original voice, wasn't it?
I believe so. I would have to double check
felt
to be
like
sure.
it.
Yeah, I mean, Sebastian Shaw was clearly the same voice. A lot of these voices are the same from the 92 through 97
Yeah.
series. And the Morlocks, who may or may not be dead. I love Leech. He was always a character that I really liked.
Oh, and by the way, the moment where Leech is like, you think he's gonna die, is like, tell me that didn't get you. I mean, he's like
my gosh.
Dobby.
Well,
or
and
Dobby
he's even
from, Harry
he's
Potter.
saying like,
Dobby,
Magneto will save us, and
Lovely
obviously
day for a walk.
obviously the visuals that go with sort of the
my God, that
Gambit
was
sacrificing
incredible.
himself,
The
just
name's
the
Gambit
dialogue.
Monastery or Mon Ami.
Mon Ami, yes.
Yeah.
And
wild.
and then when there's that and it's just a black still, but it has Rogue's dialogue of "I can't feel you."
I don't know if you can see
Was that
my
Gambit or Magneto
goosebumps.
in that scene?
That was
Which one was dead?
That's Gambit.
It's Gambit.
Right, it was Gambit, right.
Yeah.
That's exactly what Wanda said to Vision in the end of WandaVision.
Oh, right.
Yep.
She said, I can't feel you.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
point. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, which is what gave me the most chills, because I was like, oh yeah, psychic people will be able to tell whether this is real or not.
Yeah. So there's so many different ways that it can go. And I was messaging with our pal Daniel Drew after I had seen it. And yes, you too can direct message me, and I've answered Craig, I've answered Cam Egan. So before we even get to our show, you can always jump in. Just always make sure that I've seen it. I try to watch it. I haven't run into that with this crowd. I have run into that on other shows that I cover, and I'm like, I didn't see it yet, but thanks for checking in to see what I thought about that reveal. And none of the people I mentioned are someone who did that, but look, these things very much happen. So I don't know what kind of time constraint the rest of you have, because I want to finish up talking about X-Men 97, but there was some big Marvel theatrical news from CinemaCon that I feel like we need to talk about. Does anybody need to tap out in the next couple minutes? You do.
No, I just want to hit two quick things.
No, I'm not quite ready to move on.
Okay.
That's why I wanted to let people know before I moved on. Yes, go ahead.
First off, I kept expecting Anne Hathaway to show up in this episode because she's the Princess of Genovia. I kept thinking she's the Princess of
I was like,
Genosa.
because she dreamed a dream of days gone by.
No, all I kept thinking was, I kept thinking of she's the Princess of Genosa. The other thing is Madeline Pryor. Thank you. Last episode, Madeline Pryor was within like 3 minutes, she was Jean Grey. She was the Goblin Queen. She was evil. And then she's like, see you, Jean. I'm going to go figure out my life. Yeah. Now she's running Genosa.
Yeah.
Yep.
She got a job already. She flew out there. They're like,
she's a resourceful woman.
Hey,
you're a clone who pretended to be somebody else. Yeah, we can trust you. Sure. Yeah. You're the Goblin Queen.
That shows the power of LinkedIn, Brody. Okay. She created her profile, and then a week later, she had the job. One thing that I had this note that I couldn't work into our conversation, something that Kurt said, it sort of references that moment that we showed, though. What he says to Gambit is, love is best measured in what we forgive. And I was thinking about, like, oh my gosh, the people in my life that must have loved me because of all the things that they've forgiven. Like the fact that, I'm talking about the same stories I've been reading for 40 plus years, that sort of thing. But I love that. I forgot to mention we had Banshee in this episode, and one of the original new X-Men, if you can follow that. I love when we get to see Banshee.
What part was that? There's so
they were all seated at the table. It's actually
got it. Okay.
When we see Sebastian Shaw and Emma Frost, Banshee's and Moira's at the table. So they're like, we'll put the Irishman and the Scottish lass in the same scene. We'll check.
Get all the accents on the board.
Yeah. I mean, he flew, but he wasn't wearing his costume, so it was kind of hard to miss him. I mean, it was not hard to miss him.
I thought about playing it, but I don't want to stream something directly from Disney Plus, and
probably best.
I don't know. I think it'll slow us down, and then I also don't know if we get flagged for it. but notice the sad version of the X-Men theme that we got at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know that I remember hearing it before, but tell me in the chat if I've just missed it in the past. But I was like, oh, that's a nice touch. It's like it harkens back to TV of an earlier era where the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island, they had like all those different versions of the theme. So Bo DeMeo touched on it. We're sort of touching on it. Before we move on to the CinemaCon stuff, let's talk about what's coming up with this trailer, this X-Men animation, this Marvel animation X-Men 97 trailer. It has a title. It's called War.
You have to get everyone out. He's coming.
If only you knew the future we have in store.
While you X-Men have been holding hands, we've been placing dominoes.
All of our trash there. Speaking.
You think there's really going to be a war?
We shall not live our days wondering if we could have saved more.
We face this as we always have.
Ooh, chills.
And
Chills,
there's that one still.
okay.
There's that one still is the reason why. And if you remember from the original series, they do that story from Uncanny X-Men 268. They tell that story, which, by the way, is this story right here from Uncanny X-Men 268 with Wolverine, Captain America, and Black Widow. So Captain America has been on this show before, but the idea that we see his shield in the snow is, yes, it's a spoiler for people who don't watch trailers, but I was so goddamn excited about it that I wanted to show that off, because that was one of those like, holy shit. Obviously they were able to do it even in under the old regime, but now it's all under the mouse umbrella. So very excited for where we are going to go with this series. Now, we do know that next week is Life Death Part 2, sort of carrying on that thread. And then we have another episode before we get the Extinction 3-parter. And Katie, you're gonna miss out on some great X-Men stuff, but all for a good reason. You'll be on your belated honeymoon with your
lousy reason.
Yeah. What? They don't have Disney Plus? They don't have internet in Greece? So,
they might, but they
No,
also
it's-
have great food and wine, and I'm very excited.
yes, as
All the more reason.
Yeah.
Why you bring your
want
fire
some
stick
Greek
with
wine.
you?
right. Yeah, exactly.
We
Hey,
actually-
StreamYard works from over there. We'll work it all out, but we'll be excited to welcome you back as we wind down this season of X-Men 97. So there was a fair amount of news out of CinemaCon, which, even though we've already gone for an hour and 17 minutes about this X-Men episode, this isn't really something that I want to put on the back burner until next week, because no one will be talking about it anymore by next week. And there was just some very cool things that we were able to see and hear more about. So they saw footage. So the people there at CinemaCon saw footage from a few different things. That's the stuff that I'm not going to get into the specifics of what people were able to see. There's like 9 minutes of Deadpool, I think, that they got to see, which obviously that's the closest one we're going to get. And it seems like Deadpool is going to very much have the tone we're all kind of expecting. I
Is he
think
gonna
that,
kill the Fox universe?
well, there is a series called Deadpool Kills the Marvel Universe.
No, it's one of my favorite comics.
I think that we might get some stuff in there, but we got some Captain America: Brave New World. Getting to see the first instance of Harrison Ford as President Thunderbolt Ross, and just some other stuff dealing with that. And I think that it's exciting for that. And Valentine's Day 2025, which sounds far away, but you're like, wait, that's less than a year. So Eric, we might have a better Valentine's Day than we did this year. Where
Nothing will be better than us and Madam Web.
I don't think I told this story on this show, but I mentioned it that when I was in Monterey, we were at a souvenir shop and I had on my Marvel sweatshirt. And this kid who was checking us out struck up a conversation. And he's like, "Oh, did you see Madam Web?" And I looked at him and I'm like, "Yeah, this is one of the worst movies I ever saw." And he's like, "Oh." And he seemed, and he's like, "Oh, but didn't you like the story?" I'm like, "No, it was really bad." And I'm like, it's worse than Morbius. And he said, "Oh, that looked terrible. I didn't see it." I'm like, "All right, you have a crush on Sydney Sweeney, don't you?" and I don't think that film did much for you. So I met the guy. I should have gotten his info so we could have had him on the show. I think he was
The one guy that liked it.
The man who liked Madam Web.
Madam Web.
only
He's
living
the
guy.
Madam Web fan.
And good for him. Good for him. I'm glad.
Yes.
I'm glad he got that movie.
Right, exactly. And the thing about the Brave New World, what people saw is it definitely feels like a continuation from Falcon and Winter Soldier, although Winter Soldier apparently is not in that film as we've been told. But there are characters from that we are going to see, and I think the story sounds like it'll definitely be an interesting one, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. There was the revelation. I can't find the screen of it, which
Oh no. Sounds like you may have cut out just for a brief moment there, but
yeah, no, there was something playing in my ear.
Oh,
yeah. In any case, Thunderbolts. We have the title for Thunderbolts. It's Thunderbolts with an asterisk at the end. Who's excited about that asterisk?
like Jeb.
No, that's an exclamation point. It's more like Billy Crystal's movie about Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris, 61 with the
61.
asterisk.
Oh, with an asterisk. I'm
so-
sorry. Sorry. Yep.
Yeah,
Sorry, Jeb had
so
the exclamation.
So I guess it's all about John Walker and Yelena trying to hit 61 home runs in a season, which I'm all in for that movie. I don't know about anybody else, but
well, that might be why Winter Soldier's not in Captain America.
Right, exactly.
Because he's in Thunderbolts.
Yes, I think that is actually why. And I guess they didn't want to spread Bucky too thin. Do
we see the original Captain America in the next Captain America movie? Do we see Old Man?
Do you mean yeah? So the Old Man, yes, he is. He was definitely seen in the footage, and we know something about.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The
Okay,
storyline for him.
Old Man Cap.
Yeah, I forget the character's name. I was too busy looking for the fact that we have Thunderbolts
like
with
this.
an asterisk.
Kind
of actually, yeah. Hold that back up for a second. Wait, hold on. Whatever. Yes, that's kind of that's
kind of
kind of what happens. To
He's missing a
poor
head.
old Man Cap.
It's like Winter Soldier without the arm.
Yeah. So obviously there is a lot of excitement about all this CinemaCon stuff, and I think that I love this. That Ivan Soda says they better reveal that Sharon Carter is just an evil Skrull. I mean, they managed to make her slightly interesting by having her run Madripoor, but it is entirely possible that she's a Skrull. I wouldn't.
She's not a fan favorite though. It's but then again, aren't they bringing back like Liv Tyler?
When it comes to Deadpool, if you believe what you read, we might see Liv Tyler, we might see Jennifer Garner. There's a number of people that we might see. I'm all in on that, but
they just bring back all the most hated versions of everything is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, Ben Affleck will be just smoking outside of a door with some Dunkin' Donuts in hand,
sad.
And then Deadpool will just shank and be done.
Yeah. So, and it seems like Deadpool 3 is called. It's called
Deadpool and Wolverine, isn't it?
Yeah, Deadpool and Wolverine. Yeah. That was kind of the big reveal there, and Fantastic Four, they say July 25th, 2025. So they're letting us know like this is a bit of a lean year. Cinematically, we're getting Deadpool, but the idea that Thunderbolts asterisk, and of course Captain America, Brave New World, and the one I just said, Fantastic Four. So we've got all that stuff coming. So very excited to see all of it. Again, if you really want to know what people saw in the footage that was screened there, you can find it fairly easily. I will tell you that if I had been in that room, I would be running my mouth about what I saw. But because I didn't see it, I'm not going to read up on it in the specifics. But
Fair enough.
I would say, all right, tune out if you don't want the spoilers, and then I'd spoil everything. But the one link that I saw that I didn't click on said that Deadpool teases some of the cameos that we get. So very excited for that. So in any case, so a lot of stuff coming. There was a lot of buzz about that, but most of the buzz is about stuff that's in the footage that they saw. I don't know how anybody gets into CinemaCon. Do we need to like buy a theater franchise if we want to go to CinemaCon? I'm not quite sure how it works.
Yeah, one of my friends was there, but she actually works with the motion picture exhibitors. So yeah, she has like a real reason to be there.
So can she come on and give us some spoilers?
I'm happy to reach out.
Well, no, I don't know if I want that.
She's an attorney, so she might.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
right. So she'll charge us for the hour,
or the 6-minute interval, however long it takes.
That's true. Well, we had a fun, jam-packed episode, and I will reference for everybody. I'll just explain that we're going to do this show next Wednesday at noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. I believe that was the time we settled on. That's what it sounds like. And you may have noticed that our interview with Joseph Culp, the Doctor Doom from the original Fantastic Four, that is not up yet. Our pal Jonathan London wanted to kind of add some stuff to it. The interview itself looks great. He wants to kind of put some visuals along with it. But when we're back for the next episode of this show, I will tell you when you can watch that. I know I've been teasing it for like a month now. Part of the reason is that we didn't record it when I thought we did. Now we have it. It's ready to go. And we will let you know next Wednesday. So we will have to, those of us who will be here and not gallivanting around the Mediterranean, get up and watch X-Men 97 Wednesday morning, except for Nate, who watches it before bed. Anyway, I know this was a long one, but there was a lot to this episode, and I wanted to at least touch on, some of the important news. The movie that looks like it has a typo.
And it's been recently corrected.
Yes, right, exactly. In any case, and Feige said, we're not going to tell you. You'll have to see the movie to understand why that's there. And I'm like, all right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, Ivan Soto, Deadpool, very hard R. Looks like I won't be seeing it. I hate raunchy and gross R-rated movies. But Deadpool is definitely not the character for you, Ivan.
No,
that's what.
Not into pegging.
I mean, I would say a lot of the raunch is mostly spoken about. I mean, the violence is definitely
the violence is there. Yeah, that's the good.
Ivan, you might. Well, Ivan, you might want to watch the show Euphoria.
Nope.
No.
Sydney Sweeney's in that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Mary Jane. Mary Jane's in that show. Yeah. So in any case, that's the Deadpool. I think that, sort of talking about what envelopes Disney's willing to push. That's the Deadpool I think that everybody's excited that we'll get to see. So join us next Wednesday. I know that this show moves around a lot in the schedule, and it's really because of Katie. No, it's
wow.
It's
I gotta go and get married.
Yes, I did.
A year ago. It wasn't quite, but
there's like such spite.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Oh, no.
But so if you miss Katie over the next few weeks, Katie, where can people keep in touch with you?
You can always find me at @ElSassyPants on most things, ELSASSYPANTS, sometimes with a Z on TikTok. I will probably be posting photos about Greece and Italy, so that's fun. Or if you'd like, on May 3rd, go hop on Netflix. Check out Unfrosted.
Oh, yes.
Oh, that's right. Yes, I'm glad you reminded me. But perhaps we will see you before that. See, now that's a reason
Probably.
for you to be on that week, so that you can be like, and Unfrosted.
I mean, especially if we record on May 3rd.
May 3rd, which we very well could. And David Brody, where can our favorite Brooklyn boy be found?
You can always find me on social media at David Brody with a Y. You can find me on the Brooklyn Boys podcast. And on April 18th, which is the day after our next episode, so I'll probably mention it again, the new set of wacky packages from our friends at Tops comes out.
Yes.
And I've got a couple of new stickers in there. Look for the popcorners and ring dings spoofs. So
I am very excited for that. And yes, we will definitely talk about that next week. Eric
only
Connor.
available at tops.com.
Only available at tops.com.
Yes, that's
okay,
correct.
good to know. All right. So I will not go to Quacky Sugar Bowl, where I bought comics in the late 80s that has been closed for 25 years, and see if maybe they've reopened and started restocking wacky packages and Garbage Pail Kids. Eric
Nice.
Connor, where can you be found?
Well, Grease is the word over at Count Eric Connor on X and on Insta. Congratulations, Katie. Have a fabulous time in Greece. Ironically, your husband's going to be on next week instead of you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of weird to bring it up now, but
Hello, Sassy Pants.
chatting with him. They call me Mr. Sassy Pants.
They call him La Sassy Pants.
And as always, I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at ChristianDMZ. You can find my personal podcast, The Bladtcast, BLADTCAST, and the show I do for the Who Are These Podcast Network, Who Are These Broadcasters?
WATB.
WATB. We spent a lot of time on the eclipse this week, and it's not even so much about the eclipse. It's about the way the broadcasters were reacting to the eclipse during footage where we could see nothing. I could not get enough clips of like, oh my God, and look right there. And then like, yeah, even the anchors back in the studio, I was like, after 30 seconds, like, oh, now we see something. So check that out. And also we did spend some time doing a wrap up of some of the April Fool's Day jokes that were played on local news and on talk shows. And they're all terrible. Not even one of them was funny.
Ivan, you're not going to want to watch that.
Well, we don't have that.
Is that too raunchy?
I needed to get that pixelated, but we'll have that next week, actually, from the
Yay.
So, you can find that Who Are These Podcasts YouTube channel, and there is an audio feed if you just want to listen. You couldn't see anything in the clips of the eclipse anyway, so you might as well just listen to the audio version. In any case, that is all the time we have for now. And as we touch on an hour and 32 minutes, I say to each and every one of you, as the great Stan Lee would say, Excelsior!